There are 23 banned cards in the Pokemon TCG that are either overpowered or extremely toxic to play against. Number 1 on the ban list, we have Archeops from Black and White Noble Victories. Archeops is banned for its ability, Hidden Power, that stops both players from playing a Pokemon from their hand to evolve another Pokemon. This ability almost always ended up winning the game for the player who used it first. Many decks rely on evolution to win the game, so matches would become unplayable once Archeops was in play. Archeops was easily cheated into play with a combination of Battle Compressor to discard Archeops and Maxis Hidden Ball Trick, which reads you can play this card only when it is the last card in your hand, put a fighting type Pokemon from your discard pile onto your bench, then draw 5 cards. Number 2 on the ban list, we have Chip Chip Ice Axe from Sun and Moon Unbroken Bonds. Chip Chip Ice Axe is an item card that reads look at the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck and choose one of them. Your opponent shuffles the other cards back into their deck. Then you put the card you chose on top of their deck. Chip Chip Ice Axe was part of a toxic hand control deck that was plaguing the Pokemon trading card game at this time, to keep your opponent from drawing into anything playable. Chip Chip Ice Axe was paired with Marshadow from Shining Legends, with its ability Let Loose, that reads when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto the bench during your turn, you may have each player shuffle their hand into their deck and draw 4 cards. Ice Axe was also paired with Flabebe with its ability Evolutionary Advantage, which reads if you go second, this Pokemon can evolve during your first turn. To evolve into Floette, to use its ability Flower Picking, that reads when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may choose 2 random cards from your opponent's hand. Your opponent reveals those cards and shuffles them into their deck. Pairing Chip Chip Ice Axe with these cards and cards such as Jesse and James, Delinquent, Red Card, Mars, and other hand control decks made a very toxic game environment. The third card we have on the ban list is Delinquent from XY Breakpoint. Delinquent is a supporter card that reads, discard any stadium card in play. If you do, your opponent discards 3 cards from his or her hand. This was an extreme amount of hand control that was paired with the item card Red Card that reads your opponent shuffles his or her hand into his or her deck and draws 4 cards. These 2 cards would leave your opponent with a single card in their hand. Delinquent also paired with Pokemon that disrupt your hand, such as Floette and Dusknoir and Trevenant GX, which could easily leave your opponent with 0 cards in their hand. The combination of Lieutenant Surge's strategy to play 2 more supporter cards in the same turn would allow you to play Delinquent with Jesse and James, Mars, and other disruption supporters. Delinquent created an unfavorable playing environment that could be continuously used with the item card VS Seeker. The 4th card on the ban list is Flabebe from Sun and Moon Forbidden Light. Flabebe was a piece of a toxic hand attack deck with its ability Evolutionary Advantage that reads if you go second, this Pokemon can evolve during your first turn. This allowed Flabebe to evolve into Floette on the first turn, going second. Floette's ability, Flower Picking, reads when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may choose 2 random cards from your opponent's hand. Your opponent reveals those cards and shuffles them into their deck. These 2 cards were paired with Marshadow and Chip Chip Ice Axe to form a powerful hand-locking deck. Marshadow would reduce your opponent's hand to 4, Flabebe would remove 2 of those cards, and Chip Chip Ice Axe would allow you to put the worst possible card on the top of your opponent's deck for them to draw into. The 5th card on the ban list is Forest of the Giant Plants from XY Ancient Origins. Forest of the Giant Plants is a powerful stadium card and the only stadium card on the ban list. Forest of the Giant Plants reads, each player's grass Pokemon can evolve during his or her first turn or the turn he or she plays those Pokemon. While Forest of the Giant Plants was legal to play, it was paired with the Vileplume line that has the ability, Irritating Pollen, that reads, each player can't play any item cards from his or her hand. Another option was to pair the stadium with grass type Phantump and evolve it into the Psychic Stage 1 Trevenant that has the ability Forest Curse that reads as long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, your opponent can't play any item cards from his or her hand. Forest of the Giant Plants made grass type decks overpowered and unfavorable to play against with the disruption they quickly provided with Stage 1 and Stage 2 grass Pokemon. Number 6 on the ban list, we have Getsis from Black and White Plasma Freeze. Getsis is a disruption supporter card that reads your opponent reveals his or her hand and shuffles all item cards found there into his or her deck. Then draw a number of cards equal to the number of item cards your opponent shuffled into his or her deck. Decks often play more than half of the 60 card limit as item cards, since there is no limit to how many you can play per turn. Item cards are used to search for Pokemon, and energy cards to set up and play the game. Later in the match, item cards are used to recycle resources and close out the game. Getsis was paired with cards such as Hex Maniac and Silent Lab to also turn off your opponent's Pokemon abilities. Removing your opponent's item cards and Pokemon abilities created a very unbalanced gameplay environment. The 7th card on the ban list is Hex Maniac from XY Ancient Origins. Hex Maniac is a disruption supporter card that reads, until the end of your opponent's next turn, each Pokemon in play, in each player's hand, and in each player's discard pile has no abilities. This includes cards that come into play on that turn. This was supposed to be a balanced effect to turn off abilities for both players for one turn. But the player using Hex Maniac can use all of their Pokemon's abilities before playing Hex Maniac, so the effect only disrupts your opponent. Hex Maniac is extremely powerful in the early game to prevent your opponent from setting up their strategy. Hex Maniac creates situations where you could lose the game before you even get a chance to play by setting you back a turn on your initial setup. Number 8 on the ban list is Island Challenge Amulet from Sun and Moon Cosmic Eclipse. Island Challenge Amulet is a tool card that reads, the Pokemon GX or Pokemon EX this card is attached to gets minus 100 hit points, and when it is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, that player takes one for your prize card. Island Challenge Amulet was part of an extremely unfair combo that could set your opponent down to 0 cards in hand and give you the ability to manipulate the next card they draw. By playing Island Challenge Amulet on Jirachi EX, it would knock out the Jirachi EX since it only has 90 hit points, giving your opponent a prize card. You could do this multiple times, then use the effect of Miss Magus to draw 7 cards, with the drawback of it being knocked out. This would give your opponent all but one prize card if it was set up correctly. Reset Stamp was then played to reduce your opponent's hand down to 1, and then you would play a supporter card such as Mars, Jesse and James, or Delinquent to reduce their hand to 0. The item Chip Chip Ice Axe allowed you to choose which card your opponent would draw into next, keeping them locked out of the game. This became known as the Amulet Lock deck. The 9th card on the ban list is Jesse and James from Hidden Fates. Jesse and James is a disruption supporter card that reads, each player discards 2 cards from their hand, your opponent discards first. When Jesse and James released, the item card Red Card was still legal to play. Setting your opponent to 4 cards, then having them discard 2, created a very unfair advantage. With the Pokemon card Wheezing and the ability Surrender Now that reads once during your turn, if this Pokemon is discarded with the effect of Jesse and James, you may have your opponent discard a card from their hand. You could set your opponent down to 1 card with a 3-card combo. If you were able to play Lieutenant Surge's strategy first, you could potentially play 2 copies of Jesse and James or another hand disruption supporter, such as Mars or Delinquent, or even a copy of Boss's Orders to target down a heavy retreat Pokemon. The ease that Jesse and James could reduce your opponent's hand down to 1 or even 0 cards made it an easy inclusion on the ban list. The number 10 card on the ban list is Lieutenant Surge's strategy from Sun and Moon Unbroken Bonds. Lieutenant Surge's strategy allowed the user to use 2 additional supporter cards after it was played. Supporters are the most powerful trainers in the game, so being able to play more than 1 per turn is inherently strong. The most deadly combination involving Lieutenant Surge's strategy was to play the card Jirachi EX and search for Lieutenant Surge's strategy. Then play the item card Island Challenge Amulet onto your Jirachi EX, which knocks out the Jirachi EX, allowing your opponent to take a prize card. After your opponent takes multiple prize cards, you then play Reset Stamp to reduce your opponent's hand. With Lieutenant Surge's strategy, you could then play multiple copies of Delinquent, Mars, and Jesse and James to remove all of the cards from your opponent's hand, not allowing them to even play. Island Challenge Amulet, Reset Stamp, Mars, Jesse and James, and Lieutenant Surge's strategy were all in the standard format at the same time, causing the Amulet Lock deck to become an extremely powerful meta deck. The 11th card on the ban list is Lysandra's Trump card. Lysandra's Trump card was printed in XY Phantom Forces and is one of the most powerful cards ever printed. Lysandra's Trump card reads, each player shuffles all cards in his or her discard pile into his or her deck, except for Lysandra's Trump card. This card negates the downside of having to discard cards to play other cards such as Ultra Ball, Computer Search, and Professor's Research. These downsides help balance the game. Lysandra's trump card also removes the deck out win condition for mill decks. VS Seeker allowed you to recycle Lysandra's trump card. You could then use Lysandra's trump card to recycle cards such as Crushing Hammer, Super Scoop Up, Pokemon Catcher, Hypnotoxic Laser, Pokédoll, and then VS Seeker to give an infinite amount of resources. And with the draw power of Shaman EX, this created an overpowered and completely broken combination. Number 12 on the ban list, we have Marshadow from Shining Legends. Marshadow has the overpowered ability, Let Loose, which reads, when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, during your turn, you may have each player shuffle their hand into their deck and draw 4 cards. This is the same effect as the supporter card Judge as an ability. Being able to play Marshadow on turn 1 reduces your opponent's hand size before they even get a chance to play. Paired with other handlock cards such as Delinquent, Jesse and James, and Mars, Marshadow could help reduce your opponent's hand to 0 with ease. Using item cards such as Scoop Up Net allows you to play Marshadow back onto your bench, giving you hand disruption multiple times in a game without even using a supporter card for turn. You could then play other supporter cards to refill your hand or gust up one of your opponent's Pokemon on the bench for a key knockout. Number 13 on the ban list, we have Maxis Hidden Ball Trick from XY Primal Clash. Maxis Hidden Ball Trick reads, you can play this card only when it is the last card in your hand, put a fighting Pokemon from your discard pile onto your bench, then draw 5 cards. Maxis Hidden Ball Trick allowed you to put extremely powerful and disruptive fossil Pokemon into play as early as turn 1. Kabutops from Team Up has the ability Fossilized Memories that reads, as long as this Pokemon is in your active position, your opponent can't play any supporter cards from their hand. Omastar has the ability Fossil Bind that reads, as long as you have fewer Pokemon in play than your opponent, they can't play any item cards from their hand. The most broken play with Maxis Hidden Ball Trick was to put Archeops into play. With its ability Ancient Power, each player can't play any Pokemon from his or her hand to evolve his or her Pokemon. Being able to place any of these Pokemon into play on your first turn causes an extremely unbalanced game state. Number 14 on the ban list, we have Milotic from XY Flashfire. Milotic is a support Pokemon that accelerates energy into play with its ability Energy Grace that reads, once during your turn, before you attack, you may knock out this Pokemon. If you do, attach 3 basic energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon, excluding Pokemon EX. The problem with this card is it specifies EX Pokemon instead of Pokemon with a rule box, allowing you to use this ability to power up your Pokemon GX, V, and EX creates a very unfair advantage. With cards such as In and Iono available, giving your opponent a prize card can cause disruption with minimal downside. Number 15 on the ban list, we have Mismagius from Sun and Moon Unbroken Bonds. Mismagius has the ability Mysterious Message that reads, once during your turn, before you attack, you may draw cards until you have 7 cards in your hand. If you drew cards in this way, this Pokemon is knocked out. It's as broken as it sounds. Not only does this give you the effect of a supporter as an ability, it also gives your opponent a prize card, which can combo with other cards such as Reset Stamp, In, Iono, and even Reversal Energy. Number 16 on the ban list, we have Orenguru from Sun and Moon Ultra Prism. Orenguru has the attack Resource Management that reads, put 3 cards from your discard pile on the bottom of your deck in any order. This attack caused an infinite loop of resources and paired well in lock and control decks to recycle cards such as Crushing Hammer, to remove energy cards from play, Bellbella and Bryson to mill your opponent's deck and limit their bench, and also Jesse and James to reduce your opponent's hand size. You could also recycle cards such as Pokédoll to keep your opponent from taking a prize on the turns you don't have Orenguru in play. At first glance, Orenguru doesn't seem worthy of a ban, but any card that causes an infinite loop of resources can be abused and creates an unfavorable state of gameplay. Number 17 on the ban list, we have Puzzle of Time from XY Breakpoint. Puzzle of Time is a unique item card that reads, you may play 2 Puzzle of Time cards at once. If you played 1 card, look at the top 3 cards of your deck and put them back in any order. If you play 2 cards, put 2 cards from your discard pile into your hand. Puzzle of Time did not prevent you from taking the Puzzle of Time cards you discarded with its second effect, causing an infinite loop. If you were to take only 1 Puzzle of Time from your discard pile, you could play another from your hand to gain additional resources. The resource recovery could be used on A-spec cards such as Computer Search and Life Dew that were limited to 1 per deck because of their power. Resource recovery is inherently strong, and Puzzle of Time was not restricted enough for balanced play. Number 18 on the ban list, we have Red Card from XY base set. Red Card is one of the most disruptive cards ever printed. The effect of your opponent shuffles his or her hand into his or her deck and draws 4 cards would make a powerful supporter card. Red Card is an item card, allowing you to still play your supporter for turn. Being able to disrupt your opponent's hand and use Guzma or Boss's orders to gust a Pokemon from the bench can easily win you a match. When paired with handlock cards such as Delinquent and Jesse and James, Red Card becomes too powerful for a balanced and fair format. Number 19 on the ban list, we have Reset Stamp from Sun and Moon Unified Minds. Reset Stamp reads, your opponent shuffles their hand into their deck and draws a card for each of the remaining prize cards. This is the same effect as one of the most powerful supporters ever printed in, but you get to keep your hand intact and still use another supporter card for your turn. If your opponent has 1 prize card remaining, Reset Stamp reduces their hand to 1 card. This opens the door for you to remove all the cards from your opponent's hand with Mars, Jesse James, Delinquent, and other hand-locking supporters. Being able to play other supporter cards like Welder and Boss's Orders the same turn as you disrupt your opponent's hand is just too powerful to have in the game. Number 20 on the ban list, we have Sableye from Black and White Dark Explorers. Sableye is a resource recovery Pokemon with its attack Junk Hunt that reads, put 2 item cards from your discard pile into your hand. At first glance, this seems like a bulk unplayable card, but with the item cards Lily's Pokédoll and Robo Substitute, along with the A-Spec card Life Dew, you could continuously place cards into your active spot that do not give a prize card when knocked out. This created a stall mechanic that allowed you to play cards, such as Team Rocket's Handiwork, to mill your opponent's deck, and cards such as Faba and Team Flare Grunt to discard energy, tool cards, stadium cards, keeping your opponent from even playing the game. This very unassuming card creates a very toxic gameplay environment. Number 21 on the banned list is probably one of the most well-known cards ever printed in the Pokemon trading card game, Shaman EX from XY Roaring Skies. Shaman EX is notorious for being one of the most overpowered cards ever printed, even promoting Pokemon to reprint the Roaring Skies set years after its initial release to get Shaman EX into the hands of players that wanted it. Shaman has the ability setup that reads, when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you may draw cards until you have 6 cards in your hand. The sheer amount of drawing provided by Shaman EX's setup ability allowed dangerous combo decks to function at an alarmingly consistent rate. With the introduction of Scoop Up Net, it became too easy to use setup repeatedly in a single turn and finally landed itself on the banned list. But really, we all know that Scoop Up Net is the card that should have hit the ban list over Shaman EX. The last 2 cards on the ban list, number 22 and 23, are Unknowns from Sun and Moon Lost Thunder. Both Unknown were banned for the alternate win conditions in their abilities. Unlike some of the other Unknown, the Unknown Hand and the Unknown Damage abilities required no interaction with your opponent. Players could simply win the game by playing to the effect of the unknown card and ignoring your opponent's board. Do you guys think that any of these cards can be taken off of the ban list? Let me know down in the comments. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this, and I'll see you in the next one.